Hey, Math Cheetah and Fraction Ferret here again, back by popular demand. Fraction Ferret's a little bit spunky this evening. Are you ready for lesson 3-7, comparing and ordering fractions? Fraction Ferret, what do you think? Yay! No biting. No biting! Which fraction is smaller? 3/8 or 1/5? Or are they equivalent? Record your answer using a less than, greater than, or equal to sign, and be prepared to justify your conclusion. Pause the video. So let's look at some student strategies. What did this student do? Comparing 3/8 to 1/5. Take a look at this student's work. What was this student doing, and why? Remember our fraction rule that we came up with for making equivalent fractions? By multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the same number, we can come up with an equivalent fraction. So by multiplying our numerator and denominator of 3/8, multiplying each of those by 5, we come up with 15/40, which is equivalent to 3/8. Now, that's the equivalent fraction for our first fraction. We're comparing 3/8. For the second fraction, 1/5, what was this student doing? Why did this student choose to multiply the second fraction's numerator and denominator by 8? What was the student trying to do? The student wanted to be able to compare fractions that had like denominators, 40ths. So, the student figured out that if they multiply 5 times 8, they're going to get the 40 on the bottom, the denominator, and then they multiplied their numerator by 8. 1 times 8 is 8, and they got 8/40. Now, can you compare 8/40 to 15/40? Since our denominators are the same, then our whole is broken into the same number of equal parts. So if I have 15 of those equal parts compared with 8 of those equal parts, I know that 15 of my 40ths is going to be the bigger fraction. So 8/40 is less than 15/40. And since 8/40 is equivalent to 1/5, and my 15/40 is equivalent to my 3/8, then I know that my 3/8 is greater than my 1/5. And I can put that sign in to show that 3/8 is greater than 1/5. Here's another student's strategy. What did this student do? How is this going to help me to compare 3/8 and 1/5? So, I see that the student wanted to make an equivalent fraction for my 1/5. So the student took 1/5, multiplied the numerator and the denominator by 3, and came up with an equivalent fraction of 3/15. How's this going to help me? I want to compare this to my 3/8. So my 1/5 is equivalent to 3/15. Now I have fractions with like numerators. So now I can think, The more equal pieces I break something up into, the smaller they're going to be. So if I break my one whole into 15 pieces, those pieces are going to be smaller than if I broke them up into eighths. So having 3/8, which are larger pieces of my whole, that's going to be larger than if I have 3/15. And since 3/15 and 1/5 are equivalent, I can now say that my 3/8 is going to be greater than my 1/5. Here's another student strategy. Comparing 3/8 to 1/5, this student is thinking about benchmark fractions, fractions that they know. So this student knows that 3/8 is going to be greater than 2/8. Our denominators are the same, so if I have 3 of them, it's going to be larger than if I have 2 of them. All right, so what's equivalent to 2/8? If I look at my fraction circles, if I look at my number line, I can see that 2/8 is equal to 1/4. So now, what if I were to compare my 1/4 to 1/5? All right? So breaking something up into 4 equal parts, those parts are going to be bigger than if I broke them up into 5 equal parts. So I know that 1/4 is greater than 1/5. And since 1/4 is equivalent to my 2/8, and 1/4 is bigger than 1/5, and I know that 3/8 is going to be even greater than my 2/8. So if that 1/4, which is equivalent to 2/8, is greater than 1/5, my 3/8 must also be greater than 1/5. One more student. What's this student's strategy for comparing 3/8 and 1/5? Using fraction circles, we know that we can see the amount of the one whole that's shaded. This is my 1/5, and this is my 3/8. And by looking at the shaded portion, I can see that the shaded portion of 3/8 is larger than the shaded portion of 1/5. So 1/5 is less than 3/8. Using the number line, let's remember that the one whole is the distance between 0 and 1. Both of my number lines have the same one whole. 1/5 lands here, and 3/8 lands here. I can see that my 3/8 is closer to my one whole than my 1/5 is. So once again, with this strategy, we see that 3/8 is greater than 1/5. All right. Please order these fractions from smallest to largest. Be ready to hand your work in tomorrow. Be sure your name is on the paper, please. Right, Fraction Ferret? Names on the papers. See you tomorrow.